Hi, we are doing A-level biology, and today's topic is coordination. Just remember to already subscribe to our YouTube channel, as you see there. Now, um, this topic, normally we look at it in senior 6 or senior 5, depending on the coverage. But basically, we're going to be looking at coordination in animals, and it's going to be presented by me, teacher Bbumba Patrick. In this video, which is lesson 1, we're going to be looking at the types of nerve cells. I will explain all of them, as well as explaining the resting potential of the axon membrane. So you just have to be focused so that we can understand. Now, the main highlights of this video is that 1, I'll introduce to you what coordination in animals is all about. And then secondly, we shall be identifying the types of nerve cells. If you don't want to call them nerve cells, you can call them neurons. It's the same. Then here, I'll also expound more on differences between motor neurons and sensory neurons. And then later on, I'll explain the resting potential of a nerve cell, that is the axon membrane. Now, basically with coordination, we are looking at the transmission of both chemical and electrical messages, respectively, from one body part to the other in response to a specific stimulus. Now, that stimulus is like a change, any change. It could be external, it could be internal. But here you can see that I was trying to visualize external changes. External changes, for example, you can see this guy here. Rain could come and then becomes cold. So you begin shivering. So such changes, or it's too hot, or you've been electrocuted. So there's so many stimuli. So any change in the external or internal environment of the body of an organism, which results into an appropriate response. Some of the internal stimuli could be maybe increase in blood sugar level. There's so many, we can't finish them, but of course, some of them we shall be looking at them in coordination in the endocrine system, where we shall explain more. Now, unlike animals, unlike plants, they have different types, but related systems of coordination. So we have what we call the nervous system, which we are going to be focusing on now. And we also have the endocrine system, which I will focus on later in some other videos. Now, the nervous system is very fast. Its effects are localized, that is in a particular place. For example, when you step on a nail or fire is burning you, fire is going to burn you in that particular place. So it's going to be so fast. But then as the impulses are being transmitted, it also involves some chemical transmission. So we shall also look at that. Now, the picture that you're seeing here shows you the brain and spinal cord, which we normally call the central nervous system, made up of the brain and spinal cord. Now, they are nerves that pick impulses from the rest of our body parts. Those nerves, you can call them peripheral nerves. So you have those that will pick information from the surrounding and then take it to the central nervous system, and then the central nervous system will interpret, and then the information will be relayed back so that the body can respond appropriately. Now, the endocrine system is slower, and in this video, I'm not going to expound more on it, but it's just made up of glands, where we have glands in different parts of our bodies. So we have glands in the brain, we have glands in the neck, we have glands on the heart, we have glands on the kidneys, the pancreas, the ovaries or testes if you are male. And we must know that it is so slow. It is a slow acting, and its effects are widespread. For example, when a hormone is produced in the brain, it will be released in the blood, and then it will go all the way, for example, to direct a response, let's say on the kidney. So it is so slow, and of course, it will bring about initiation of a given response within the body. Now, the sensory information must be conducted by specialized nerve cells, which you can call neurons. The effectors could be those body parts like muscles or glands, which are supposed to produce an appropriate response. Then also, there are 3 types of neurons, as we are going to see. We have the sensory neuron. We also have the motor neuron, and we also have the intermediate neuron. Now, the intermediate neuron can also be called the relay neuron, okay? But also, much as this is how we classify or we differentiate between the different types of neurons, but neurons can also be classified as unipolar. They can also be classified based basing on the extensions, or you can call them processes that project out of them. And we have what we call the unipolar neuron, which have only one structure extending from the cell body. If you don't want to call it cell body, you can call it soma, and you can see it here, the unipolar neuron here. So it has one structure here, okay, extending from the cell body, which is the soma. We also have the bipolar neuron, which have one axon and one dendrite extending from the soma. So the bipolar, you can see that it has two structures extending from this cell body. This one is the cell body, or you can call it the soma. So you have this one, and you also have this one, okay? So those are two structures extending from the cell body. Also, we have the multipolar neuron. Now, with the multipolar neuron, you have many, one axon and many dendrites. And you can see here, this is the soma or cell body with the very many extensions that come from it. You can see that there are many extensions, and that's the word multipolar. Now, we need to understand the three types of neurons as we study at A level. These are the ones that we focus on. For us, we don't use the other classification of multipolar, unipolar, bipolar. No, okay? So for us, we study them as sensory if they can pick impulses from the environment. We study them as motor if they are going to transfer information from the central nervous system to the effector organs for the inappropriate response. And then intermediate will be found inside the brain or the central nervous system, whereby it's going to transfer information from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. So let us understand one by one. Now, this one is a motor neuron. This motor neuron is made up of a cell body with many extensions from it. Now, these extensions, you can call them, it's the dendron or dendrons. Let me pick on one. So this is going to be the dendron. That's going to be the dendron. So this dendron, normally what you must know, dendrons bring nerve impulses towards the cell body. So dendrons bring, let me write it here, dendrons bring impulses, they bring impulses to the soma or to the cell body, okay? And in this case, you can see there are many. If you can try to count 1, 2, 3, 4, there are many, okay? And then axons take away impulses, or they carry impulses away from the cell body. So axon carry, they carry away from the cell body, carry away from the cell body, okay? And of course, it has some other different parts. It has the cell body, which contains the nucleus that controls the activities of the cell. Now, it has the axon, which is, of course, carrying away impulses from, towards the effectors, okay? And then you have this Schwann cell. You can see this is the Schwann cell that produces the myelin sheath, this fatty layer on top of the axon is the myelin sheath. Then these kind of nodes, you can call them nodes of Ramveer, which we shall talk of later and what they do. bring about saltatory conduction of impulses. And then, of course, the motor end plates of the muscles were, this is the effector organ. In this case, it was the muscle. Okay. Then next, we could also think about the sensory neuron. Now, with the sensory neuron, you can see that it has a cell body. Now, I don't know whether you can be able to relate with what I told you, that dendrons bring impulses to the cell body. Okay. Now, and you can see here, this is the sensory neuron. It is coming from, let's say, this receptors in the skin, meaning that the impulse is going to be conducted towards this side. So for the cell body, that means this is going to be its dendron, and you can see it is 1. So this is going to be its dendron, and you can see that the dendron is carrying the impulse towards the cell body, or it brings impulse to the cell body. Dendron brings impulse to the cell body, and then this axon, it's also one carrying away impulses away from the cell body. And you can see it is short. So the axon of the sensory neuron is short, but check the axon of the motor neuron, it is long. The dendron is long for the sensory neuron, and check the dendrons, this dendron of the motor neuron. It's very short. There are even many dendrons of the cell body, but then the dendron of the sensory neuron is 1. Sorry, I meant to say the dendrons of the motor neuron are many, but the dendron of the sensory neuron is just 1. Just 1. But of course, the other different parts are the same, and what they do, the cell body, the dendrites, the nodes of Ram, they're all there. Schwann cell, they all do the same work in these nerve cells. And then you could also talk of the interneuron, which normally receives information from the sensory neuron via these dendrons, and then it relays them to the motor neuron via the axon. It also has the cell body, it's short and with many processes. Okay. Then going forward, these are the differences between the motor neuron, as I've talked of them, and the sensory neuron, whereby with the sensory neuron, the terminal dendrites connect with the effectors, and then the terminal dendrites connect with the intermediate neurons. Okay, that is the relay neuron, if you want to call it relay neuron. That's the relay neuron. Then the cell body is at the terminal. I think you saw it very well up there. The cell body is terminal. That means it is at one end. And then for this one, the cell body is like an axon branch, which is in the middle. That's another difference. And then another difference is that these motor neurons conduct impulses from the central nervous system towards the effector organs, but then the sensory neuron conduct impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system, that is in the brain and the spinal cord. But these ones, they get it from the brain and spinal cord, and then they take it back to the sensory organs. So those are some of the differences. And then short dendron has long dendron, that is for sensory, and I think you saw it. And then also, okay, and also has many dendrons. This one has one dendron. So these are the differences that we have just looked at. Then another thing that I would like to end with is conduction of an impulses along the axon. Now, a nerve impulse, we have been talking about the nerve impulse. The impulse, what is it? The nerve impulse is a wave of depolarization which travels along the axon membrane of the nerve. Now, what do we mean by depolarization? Now, this word depolarization comes from the word polar, and we know that in chemistry, for example, when something is polar, that is, there is an unequal distribution of charge within a given part. For example, if you're having a bond, let's say of hydrochloric acid, this bond in hydrochloric acid is a covalent bond, so they're supposed to be sharing electrons. These electrons, so because this atom is more electronegative, the chloride atom, it will tend to pull these electrons towards itself to gain a partial negative charge, and then this one will be partially deprived of the electrons, so it will have a partial positive charge. So when it has a partial positive charge, you find that this bond is called polar because one end is more negative and the other end is more positive. So in a resting membrane, the inside is normally more negative. So this is the membrane here. So you can see that the inside, that is in the cytosol. So let me write here, inside of axon membrane is more negative and outside is more positive. Okay, so when an impulse arrives, it brings in what we call depolarization. That is, it reverses the polarity. So let's say that the inside will now become more positive. The inside will now become more positive and the outside will become more negative. That's what we mean by to depolarize, to make the cell membrane from being polarized to become depolarized. Now, by nature, a nerve impulse exists in form of what we call an action potential. I'll explain more about action potential in the next coming video. So when there is no nerve impulse traveling along the nerve undergoes resting potential. That is, the inside is more negative and the outside is more positive. So we are going to now understand what makes the inside to be more negative. That's what we call the resting potential. Now, what you're seeing here is the membrane. So this is the inside, okay, the inside, and then this is going to be the outside of the membrane, outside. Now, in the membrane, there is a pump, which we shall call the sodium potassium pump. The sodium potassium pump. Okay, that is the sodium potassium pump. That is within the membrane. Now, first of all, the membrane of the axon at rest is polarized. Okay, meaning that the inside is, the one side of the membrane is negatively charged and the other side is positively charged. So the electrochemical gradient of these ions is maintained by the active sodium potassium pump, which is within the membrane. And this pump, what does it do? For every 2 potassium ions taken up inside the axon membrane, 3 sodium ions are removed or taken out of the membrane. So for every 2 potassium enter, then 3 sodiums move out. So, but much as that happens, you know that this membrane is leaking. This membrane, the axon membrane, leaks. So you can see these dots showing up that it keeps on leaking potassium ions out. Keeps on leaking potassium ions out. Keeps on leaking potassium ions out. So leaking, like in Uganda, would mean a tonya. So that means potassium ions keep on flowing out, much as this membrane does its job. Okay. So as a result of large amount of potassium ions rapidly diffusing out of the axon, then the sodium ions slowly diffusing into the axon, the rapid outward flow of the potassium ions means that the inside becomes more negative, because at the end of it all, you find that there are going to be more negative ions outside. And apart from that, also, you find that also sometimes the sodium may tend to flow in, but it is so slow along the diffusion gradient, but so slow. So the axon membrane is more permeable to potassium ions and sodium ions. So potassium ions will freely diffuse out. through specific channels. But also, it should be noted that there are negatively charged proteins and organic ions within the axon membrane. That is, I'm talking about inside here. Inside the axon membrane, there are also negatively charged proteins and ions which stay inside the axoplasm. So because they are large, they cannot leak out. And remember, that is going to increase negativity inside than the outside. Now, in summary, the resting potential will say that at rest the inside of the is polarized. That is at rest the inside of the membrane is more negative, and for every 2 potassium ions taken up, 3 sodium ions are removed from the axon, and the axon membrane continuously leaks potassium ions out of the axon. Also, you have negatively charged proteins and organic ions inside the axon membrane. But for the case of the neurons, motor neurons conduct impulses from the central nervous system to the effector, and the sensory neurons conduct impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system. The axon normally carries nerve impulses away from the cell body, but for the dendron carries impulses towards the cell body. And I hope that's it. For more of these videos, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I hope that makes it. Bye-bye.